So, hey guys, so now our lecture series will is going to be approaching astrophysics. So in this lecture series, we will take different topics such as ancient astronomy, basics of it, and telescopes and the techniques. We will learn about various galaxies and our universe, etc. So today, our first lecture is going to be ancient astronomy, which will be handled by me, and Kepler laws, which will be handled by my friend Roshan Savio. So next slide. Yeah. So yeah, next slide. Next slide. So as we know that astronomy is one of the oldest science known to history of mankind, and if we see to the if we see the sky at night, like it is of no use to us, like we cannot see the proper dark night sky. But when we compare ourselves to the people living 30 or 50,000 years ago in Africa or Roman civilizations or various civilizations, for them they had no such things as like clocks or GPS and all. So they used to track their paths and time while looking at the sky, especially at night. So there's a very famous saying that this is a very famous saying that the sky was a map, the clock, and the calendar. Okay, so here, as you know, like astronomy was used by ancient civilizations for the following: to keep daily time, predicting seasons, calendars, and eclipses by the observing motion of the stars and suns, observing lunar cycles, planets and stars, and much more. Next slide. So, as we know, the earlier people were hunters and gatherers, so they wandered from place to place. So, when archaeoastronomists, when they found their artifacts and all, so we could probably see these things, the scriptures of animals and all that they hunted. But if we closely see, there are certain dots which shows us that there are constellations they have marked in order to keep track of their place where they are and everything. Next slide. Like I said, the above mentioned paintings are about 35,000 years old apart from the painting. They were used as devices for keeping track of lunar calendar. Next slide. So there were many kind of observations that ancient people used to do in a air. Like they used to see the patterns of the stars, constellations, and the motions of the planets. So they could determine when the Earth rotates, they could determine the days, and as the Earth revolves around the sun, they could predict the seasons and also measure the year from when to start and when. And a month could be observed by studying the pattern motion of moon, our constant companion. Next slide. So this cave painting is from France and is about 18,000 from 18,000 BC, suggests the knowledge of lunar phases used by people for hunting purposes. So below this horse, you can see certain black dots. So these black dots are supposed to tell us the various phases of the moon along in a month. So which depicts like they had a track to keep days and know the month and days. Next slide. And there were certain regions like in Central Africa where there was a lot of humidity and hot temperatures. So they could not easily determine the position of the stars as compared to people of the north. So what they used to do, they could tell the various seasons through the shape of various crescent moons orientation near western horizon. So as we can see, like at the time of the year of June and July, it was at 0 degree, so there was supposed to be wet season, and as it got more and more negative, so it they used to know, okay, now wet season is going to end, then dry season is going to begin. Next slide. So this is a picture of Egyptian obelisk. which tells us the time of the day or year through its shadow. The shadow the sun casts upon on this obelisk, it tells us the time of the day. Time of the day. Next slide. The most prominent structure which is related to astronomy is the Stonehenge in England. So, like people are often amused by how such big stones were carried and put upon each other, and how. But in 1960s, before that, it was generally people were of the general view that it was just kind of a place to visit and all. But in 1960, a new theory surfaced that claimed Stonehenge was the work of ancient astronomers, and that its giant pillars were not just used to mark the summer and winter solstice, but to predict eclipses of the moon and the sun. So, as we can see in this picture, the main axis that shows us the position of the sun, the summer solstice, and it goes to like with major axis, and from these various things we could various stones we could measure the summer solstice, the winter solstice, etc., the sunrise, the sunset, and eclipses. Next slide. So the another archaeastronomy thing was this nebra sky disk it was used to determine if and when a 13 month, the so-called intercalary month, should be added to a lunar year to keep the lunar calendar in sync with the seasons. So as we can see in this there are certain scriptures of the moon and the sun and various planets and the angles. See the geometry of that, proper geometry and the angles it subtends on various planets and sun. Next slide. So one of the most famous yeah, invention of the ancient people of Greece was this Anithera mechanism. It was found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece in 1900. This has been labeled the Mona Lisa of mechanical artifacts, and it dates back to 2000 years back and is an early version of an analog computer. Next slide. So this device was made up of grass and had 76 gears, which predicted the position of the sun, the moon, and planet positions. And also, it helped in determining eclipses and could track the non-linear sky motion. It was probably inspired by a design handed down by Archimedes. Now, as we could see here, it is written it could track non-linear sky motion, uh, which was very astonishing as to history, like the non-linear sky motion was this statement was devised by Kepler, which was like many years after. But if we see the technology and like the mechanism, it predicted several years back that the planets had non-linear motion in the sky. Next slide. So now we come to calendars. So calendars is kind of a bridge between ancient astronomy and modern astronomy. Next slide. So the thing was like there are many ways, to keep the divisions of the time. Like there were mainly four divisions of time: a day, a week, a month, and year. The day, month, and year were properly observed by looking at the motion of the sun, the moon, and the stars. But the thing was there was no proper evidence of the week, like how to keep track of weeks. So people in various civilizations, what they had, like they had 4 days a week or 10 days a week, but it was like of common understanding that the number of days in a week should not exceed the days of the month. So the our modern day week is comprised. We should thank Roman civilization because it was them that said that our week should be the days of the week should be depend upon the sun, the moon, and other five planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And they were named according to their Roman god and celestial body, as Sol is Sunday, Luna Monday, Mars uh, Tuesday, Mercurius Wednesday, Jove Thursday, Venus Friday, and Saturn Saturday. So like these, there were various names of the days of the week in various like French, Italian, and Spanish. Next slide. So our modern day calendar is also a gift from Roman civilization only. So as we know, like Roman civilization, they used to start their year from the month of March because as the ice would melt and it started the summer start. So they were not like agrarian kind of civilization. So they used to go out and for wars and also they kept that kind of track. But in due course of time, what happened is like it was difficult for them because to keep track of that time because there were leap years and they used to track with lunar calendar which was 350 which was of 355 days. That is 10 or 11 days less than the solar calendar. So then they started their keeping track of months according to solar calendar by observing the motion of the sun. So that's how we get a modern day calendar. Next slide. So the birth of science. Next slide. Next slide. So the actual birth of science is from Greeks. Like Greeks had a lot of were responsible for many various you know inventions and all because they used logic to everything like about the nature of the universe and everything. So the great one of the great contributions to ancient Greeks are philosophy and logic, scientific methods, medicine, geometry, algebra, rational numbers, ideas of round earth, heliocentric universe. Next slide. So our mathematical and scientific heritage originated with the civilizations of the Middle East. So as we can see, like these light highlighted area from Nile River to Persia, here are they, these were the places where various and major scientific heritage were happened. Next slide. So the reasons as to why ancient Greeks are responsible for modern science are the because they were the first one to make models of nature. And without use of myths, they try to explain the patterns in the nature. Natural phenomena were explained by applying math and logic. Like some people at that time, they were like very holy persons and they used to support their culture a lot. So many of the things were according to their culture, as Christianity in that time or the culture in that time used to say like all good things, like all perfect things are to be sphere and circle. So later Aristotle and Ptolemy thought that our Earth should also be and not our Earth, various planets and sun should also be in perfect circle and spherical shape. And as you can see on the right hand side, this is the model of a geocentric model, which was devised by Aristotle, which says that Earth was the center of the universe and every other planet used to rotate around it. Next slide. So, why Aristotle thought that like Earth is the center of the universe is like when we rotate on a certain a disk, so the thing and when we keep the things on it, they after certain point they fall apart due to centrifuge. They fall apart due to the rotational velocity. Okay, so now what Aristotle thought, like if Earth is also rotating, if Earth is also said to be in motion or rotating around something, then why we are in stationary position only? So why does it happen? So this is the reason why he came up with an idea that Earth is the center of the universe. Now, as we can see, Eratosthenes was a famous mathematics. So what he mentioned, like he wanted to know the uh, size of the earth, like what is the size of the earth. So at somebody told him that during summer solstice, that I June 21 in Siam, there is a well. So, and well, on June 21, there is no shadow. Like this means sun is directly over that well. Okay. So what he did, he measured the angle from that, which was supposed to be, which came to be 7 degree, and that 7 degree or like 1/50th part of the circle. So from that, what he thought like on the only thing he needed to measure was the distance between Alexandria and Sai in order to measure the circumference. Next slide. So what he did, he measured the distance to Sine to Alexandria. That was around about 5,000 stadia, and angle was 7 degree. Now, how he calculated the circumference was 7 by 360 degree into circumference is equal to a distance 5,000 stadia. So the from this the circumference of the Earth he calculated was 250,000 stadia. Now, if we compare to modern value, which is around 40,000 kilometer, according to that, according to him, the circumference of the Earth was around 42,000 kilometer. So, which was roundabout like very not very precise, but according to that, into that time like 240 BC, which it was very appreciated. Next slide. Now the question was how planetary motions were explained by Greeks. Early Greeks like Aristotle, I told you, and Ptolemy proposed the geocentric model that Earth was the center of the universe and all objects around it moves in a circle because they believe everything is due to God, and God likes like circle and spheres. They are the perfect shapes. Next slide. But with geocentric model, it was difficult to explain the retrograde motion of stars. Now, what is retrograde motion of stars? It is shown by like Mars, even Jupiter and Saturn. Like on Mars in 2030, over a period of 10 weeks, Mars appeared to stop back up, then go forward again relative to the fixed stars. So this kind of motion could not be explained by geocentric model as to why, because everything happens in a circle and in a perfect manner, and then why it's going back again and then forward. So this was the problem with geocentric model. Next slide. So the next is Ptolemaic model. The most so what he built was the most sophisticated geocentric model, and it was sufficiently accurate to remain in use for about 1500 years until Nicholas Copernicus. Next slide. So the next revolutionary model was proposed by Copernicus. He proposed the first heliocentric model, and that was published on his deathbed in 1543 when he asked his friend to publish his findings after his death. So and what he measured the planetary distance in AU layout of the and also the layout of the solar system and outer planets. The only disadvantage is it still used circles for planetary motion, which is no more accurate than Ptolemaic model. He also used circles only for in order to describe the planetary motion. Next slide. So this is the example of a Copernicus model on the right hand side. So what was it? It was heliocentric. Earth orbits around Sun like other planets. Inner planet orbits are smaller. Retrograde motion only occurs for outer planets and objects when we lap Mars. Also, the stars must be very far away to see no stellar parallax, plus we feel no rapid motion. So, what was his idea was also accurate, but what was the error was like the parallax. It could not explain the brightness of the stars and its shifting positions. So, what he explained was the only reason for this is that the stars are very far away as compared are at a very far distance as compared to the distance of Earth and Sun. Next slide. So why the geocentric theory was not revolutionary as compared to heliocentric theory was, as you know, like heliocentric proposes sun at the center. but it was more of a challenge because it uh, it challenged culture and religion at that time. Like Copernicus was also a priest in a church. So in a church in Bible, it was like said that Earth is the center, and now he proposed like Earth is not the center, the sun is the center, and all other planets revolve around it. So it was very difficult for other religious people to digest it. Next slide. So, the, as I told you, the appearance of stars, their brightness and parallax played a key role in both geocentric and heliocentric models. Because in geocentric model, the distance towards stars is constant, so they never change their brightness or relative positions. As like Earth was stationary, so if Earth is stationary, so there is no question that the stars would be moving. So what Aristotle said that stars are also constant; they are also not in motion. So there is no question arising that why to why their brightness and relative positions are changing. But in heliocentric model, this is only true. Like this was only true if the stars were much farther away than the planets. Next slide. So what was the thing with this parallax was like if we can take this nearby star, okay, and now Earth is rotating around it. uh, Earth is rotating around the sun. In July, as in July, we can see the star position with the pink dot on the right hand side is in right side, and in January, if we see it is on the left because the Earth is moving. So as the star appears relative to the motion of the Earth, it also appears to change its position. So this was the problem with Copernicus model. Next slide. So now uh, the next person, Galileo, he was considered the first modern experimental scientist. He overcame several Copernican objections. Three objections with the Aristotle model were, and that were the objections: Earth could not be moving because objects in the air would be left behind. Non-circular orbits are not perfect. If Earth were really orbiting Sun, we detect stellar parallax or the seasonal shift in star positions. Next slide. So the first objective was nature of motion. He showed that objects in air would stay with the moving Earth, inertia, like it was, like he determined inertia. Like Aristotle believed all objects naturally come to rest, but Galileo showed all objects stay in motion unless an external force acts on it. So this was like his findings of like he used inclined plane and he used to throw the objects. Then he used to change the angle between them, and he found that a moving ball or an object would often come at to rest after some point of time. Next slide. The second objection was heavenly perfection. With his telescope, he saw sunspots on sun, imperfections, and mountains on moons, which proves it's not spherical but geological. Removing the celestial and terrestrial distinction motives the concepts of many worlds. And next slide. What else he observed is the various moons of Jupiter, the four moons of Jupiter. Through what through this he stated that apart from our world, there are many worlds. There are many worlds who and they are being orbited by various moons or planets. Not only our Earth is like orbiting and our moon is orbiting our Earth, but there are many planets. Those are being orbited by their moons and all. So the many world theory he devised. Next slide. So the third objection was the parallax. Tycho believed that he measured stellar distances. Lack of parallax seemed to rule out an orbiting Earth. Galileo showed that stars must be far away by his telescope to see Milky Way, which was made up of countless endless stars. If stars were much farther away, then the lack of detectable parallax was not an issue. Next slide. So as now we came come to like and like what after knowing the nature of the motion and then Kepler's law that would be taken up by Roshan Survey, we come to know the elliptic motion or shape of the orbit. So how they were the ideas according to that of Newton. According to Newton, space travel would happen. Like this is his famously known as Newton's cannonball. So what he thinks like at position V, he will be on at the top of the mountain and he fire a cannonball. So now if he fires it with no initial velocity, then the cannonball would directly fall straight down to the earth. And if he fires the cannonball velocity, which is less than the orbital velocity, like 7,000, that which is around approximately 7,000 meter per second, then the cannonball will travel some distance and then come to the ground. But if we apply a velocity greater than 7,000 meter per second, then it would start rotating around the orbit of the earth. And if we fire it with a velocity greater than the orbital velocity and less than the escape velocity, like less than 11,000 kilometers, then it would start start revolving around the earth. And if we fire it more than the velocity or escape velocity, which is around about 11,000 meter per second, then it would come out of the orbit of the earth and come in space. Like we come in space, it would be in space, and we could find many worlds as proposed by Galileo. Next slide. Also, this was Kepler Somnium was a book he launched in 1630, which was a kind of a storybook and a science fiction book. Science fiction book in which he imagined the life on the other worlds, and all of this goes hand in hand, and uh, how it progressed, like like mankind going to space and exploring sun and moon. Next slide. So the this is the timeline of the events or in the ancient of astronomy. The history of astronomy displaces us from cosmic importance, and it all happened due to Copernican revolution. Thank you. Now I would like to uh, give it to Roshan for Kepler's law.
Yeah, thank you, Archit. So, welcome, guys. I'm going to take the Kepler's laws and its derivation. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, let's just give a glance of what are the topics that are going to be discussed here. So, first, let's look at the what are central forces, and then how the angular momentum behaves in the central force system, and then energy of the system in central force motion, and then let's derive the differential equation of orbit in the central force motion of Earth, and explanation of Kepler's laws, and then derivation of Kepler's laws is Newton's formulation. Next slide. Okay, so central force. A central force is a force that acts along the line joining the two bodies between which the forces interacting. So, to put into words, a central force is a force that points from a particle directly towards or directly away from a fixed point in space, the center, and whose magnitude depends only on the distance of the object from the center. In central force, the potential V is only a function of R and nothing else. uh, a central force is always conservative. Conservative in the sense if we take the curl of a force as I've taken here in polar coordinates, polar coordinates. If we take the curl, we are getting the curl of the force is zero. So we can say that the force is conservative in nature. And so when the force is conservative and when the curl is zero, we can define a scalar potential where the force is equal to the negative of the derivative, the time independent derivative of potential. Next slide, please. So going on to the angular momentum, it's a bit of derivation here. So the equation of motion in polar coordinates is given by F is equal to ma, and that is in polar coordinates I've taken radial direction and in transverse direction is separate. So radial direction, F is equal to m into double derivative of r with respect to time minus r into t dot square. Okay. And f theta is equal to m of r theta double dot plus 2 r dot theta dot. So I think there is no confusion here because it's a direct equation that I put here. So for central force, when we take the case, so torque is r cross f and implies that torque is again replacing f, so we get torque is zero because there is R here and there is R cap over there. So torque will become zero. But for central force, because radial force is zero, we are just taking the transverse. So transfer, if you are taking, I mean, yeah, because the force is zero. So when we take the transverse direction of the force, it mean we get f theta is equal to m of r theta double dot minus 2 r dot theta dot is equal to zero. I'm just writing this equation in another form so that uh, the derivative of the second equation becomes this. So which implies that d of m r square theta dot is equal to zero. So taking we know that angular momentum is r cross p, and p in polar coordinates is p is equal to m into v, that is r dot plus r theta dot. So when we multiply it, we get m r square theta dot. So equating j and m r square theta dot, we get theta dot is equal to j by m r square. This, I think we should remember this equation because we are going to use it on the later derivation for Kepler's laws. So yeah, so now we take the dot product of the position vector and the angular momentum. We get zero, which means that the position vector with the angular momentum both are perpendicular to each other always. Next slide, please. So now coming to the total energy of the system, we know the energy of the system is equal to the sum of the kinetic energy and potential energy. Here I've taken the kinetic energy is half mv square and the potential energy is sum v of r. And we all know that the velocity in polar coordinates is given by r dot r cap is r theta dot theta cap. So, so the total energy by replacing this value of v in the equation of energy, we get E is equal to half m of this v square plus v of r, which gives us the next equation. So substituting the value of theta dot, which I have derived earlier, we get this equation that is E is equal to half m r dot square plus j square by 2 m r square plus v of r. If we see clearly here, half m r dot square is the radial kinetic energy if we take if we consider only the radial part. So for our simplicity, we can just take the, we can just keep that here and write other things as v effective, where v effective is equal to this equation, that is j square by 2 m r square plus v of r. It is called the effective potential denoted by v effective. Next slide, please. So now coming to the derivation of the differential equation for the orbit of the planets. So from the equation of motion, variable part, we have F r is equal to m of r double dot minus r theta dot square. That is equal to, I'm just rewriting this equation in other form and then substituting the value of theta dot which we have derived earlier. So we know that theta dot is equal to j by m r square as we have derived, and then rearranging the equation, we get d theta is equal to j by m r square dt. So, I mean, the thing which I've done here has no physical significance, but it can be done mathematically and it's the right reasons. So I've just inversed the equation and then multiplied on both sides with d. And so here we got a new equation for d by dt, and in the equation 1, substituting for this d by dt, we get this big equation that we see here. And when this is all just mathematical simplification, and here I've written this as the derivative. Okay, so when you get here, all I've done here is replaced r by 1 by u just for the simplification, and we will have some use with it when we see the derivation of Kepler's laws. So next slide, please. So we are done with central force motion. And so coming to the next, right, that is Copernicus. We all know that Copernicus in 1543 proposed that the way to think about a solar system is to put the sun at the center. Yeah, he proposed the heliocentric model for the first time, and it was indeed a very remarkable incident. Considering the social risk included with which Achyut has, already told the church and other religious problems that are existing. So it was actually very remarkable incident. So Johannes Kepler, he was a German astronomer, mathematician, and yes, he was an astrologer, was born on 27th of December 1571, and he was an assistant to Tycho Brahe. Retsky had his own lab, and he carried out his research by the data obtained from Tycho Brahe, and his research after research for 40 long years, he produced the three laws, very famous laws known as the Kepler's laws. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's come to the Kepler, something known as the Kepler problem. The Kepler problem is nothing but the motion of the planets or any other particle that is moving, with in a potential given by V of R is equal to minus K by R. And here in our solar system, the K is Gm by R, which is the mass of the planet multiplied by the mass of the star, that is the sun. Okay, so although Kepler discussed the Sun and the Earth system, but this method can be used for any system which is interacting with the potential given by V is equal to minus K by R form. Next step. So Kepler's first law. So the statement of Kepler's first law, once again, is all planets revolve around the Sun in elliptical orbits. So it is just the modified idea given by Nicolaus Copernicus, which stated that all planets revolve around the sun in circular orbits, and Kepler just formulated and modified it and brought it that it's not circular and it is elliptical orbits actually. So just to give an idea of what an ellipse looks like, we all already know, but still. So an ellipse is a circle. We all have learned what is a circle is. We have a point and we have a thread to which if we attach a pencil or a pen and just rotate it with the same distance all over, we get a circle. And ellipse is having 2 points called the focus and having the same thread. And if we draw the path, we get an ellipse. So a circle is just a special case of an ellipse where the foci f1 and f2 are the same. So in another point to note here is that the properties of an ellipse is it has two lengths, two significant lengths, and one is known as the major axis and the minor axis. Major axis is usually denoted by 2a, and minor axis is usually denoted by 2b. Next slide. So Kepler's second law, the statement here is the line joining the sun and the planet sweeps equal areas in equal amounts of time. So as we see, the path of the planet is elliptical, and we have taken here the sun at one of the foci of the elliptical orbit, and then let's consider the time period to be 30 days, and if you see the area swept by the line joining the sun and the planet in 30 days is equal to any time. The time interval 30 days in any part of the year. Okay, so here the blue area indicated, and here the other side, the blue area indicated, both are the same if it is the area swept in equal amounts of time. Next slide. So coming to the Kepler's third law, which is also known as the law of periods, the statement goes the square of the time period of revolution of the planet and the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis of the orbit. Semi-major axis of the orbit. Yeah. So I've plotted the graph here between the average distance from the sun cube on the horizontal axis and the orbital period squared on the vertical axis, and we see that the line and the point for every planet lie on a perfect straight line, which means that the law works. So yeah, next slide. So let's now come to the derivations of the Kepler's laws. Yeah, next slide. So the Kepler's first law derivation from Newtonian mechanics, I mean the Newton's, sorry, second law actually. F is equal to ma, which means that F is equal to m into r double dot minus r theta dot square in polar coordinates. And we know the gravitational force given by the Newton's law of gravitation. We write it as F is equal to minus c m m by r square. Or if we put the constants g m m as k, we get F is equal to minus k by r square. Now the equation of motion is given by F is equal to ma and F is minus k by r square, and ma is m into r double dot minus r theta dot square. And we know and derive that theta dot is equal to j by m r square. So putting this all together, we get this equation, that is nr double dot j square by mr cube minus k by r square. So we have also derived the equation, differential equation for the of orbit, and which goes like this: j square u square by m square u by dt square plus u is equal to minus f of 1 by u. And if you remember, we have replaced the, we have just put r is equal to 1 by u. So putting back r is equal to 1 by u, we get this equation. And next slide, I have rewritten the equation here, the same equation which we saw on the previous slide. And then if we just replace some terms here like u minus k by j square is equal to y, and just to simplify the equation so that we can bring it to a form where we can solve for the equation. So we get d square y by d theta square plus y is equal to 0. If you remember, this is a very familiar equation that we have all studied how to solve in differential equation chapter in mathematics. So if we solve for this equation, we get y is equal to a cos theta, which implies that u minus k m by j square is equal to a cos theta. So sending this k m by j square to the other side, we get u is equal to k m by j square plus a cos theta. So if you remember, we have put r is equal to 1 by u, so u again becomes 1 by r, and multiply the equation, we get j square by a m whole by r is equal to 1 plus a j square by k m cos theta. So we just replace this term j square by km as L, and E is equal to a j square by km. We get this equation, that is 1 by L is equal to 1 plus E cos theta, which is a very familiar equation that corresponds to the equation of a conic section, which may be an ellipse, which may be a circle, or a hyperbola, or a parabola. So, but when we replace the which k is equal to g m by r square r here, we get that the eccentricity for this particular case, I mean the energy for this particular case will be minus. And we know that when the energy is minus, it indicates that the path is closed. The path, I mean, it is a closed path. So now we shall see this next slide, please. Okay. So now we should see the case specifically of an elliptical orbit as Kepler discussed for the planetary motion. So the total energy which we derived, that is E, is equal to half m r dot square plus j square by 2 m r square minus k by r. Okay, and we have also told that V effective, I mean the other two terms is also to be by V effective, that is the effective potential, where also the J is a constant angular momentum. Next slide. So if we plot the graph between the V effective, I mean, I don't specify here. So R is on the horizontal axis, and V effective is plotted on the vertical axis. So if we plot V effective versus R graph, it is clear that for negative energy, I mean, if you remember, I've already said we get the negative energy for the new Kepler's problem. So the orbit is elliptical if the negative energy is given. Next step. This is just some information about the elliptical orbit. So because it is, you know, going in an elliptical path, we'll just consider the most general equation of the, not the most general. the equation of ellipse, that is x square by a square plus y square by b square is equal to 1, where mathematically we know that p is equal to a into square root of 1 minus e square. So the minimum and maximum values of r, you can see that in the figure shown here, that is the minimum value of r will be a minus ae, and the maximum value of r will be a plus ae. So r max plus r min will be 2a, that is equal to the major axis. From the plot of V effective, it is identical. It is identified that R max and R min are the turning points. So the radial velocity here will be zero. So saying this, if we substitute this in the energy equation which we have derived earlier, we get a quadratic, and rearranging this equation, we get a quadratic equation for which if we solve, we get R max plus R min is equal to minus 2mk divided by 2 me, where E is equal to minus k by 2a. So because energy is negative, it is a closed path and it is n. So next slide. So here we see the relation between the energy, that is capital E as well derived, and the eccentricity small e. The energy is given by is equal to half mr dot square plus the effective potential. And for central potential, we know V of r is equal to minus k by r. And for the solution of r bit, as we have derived, is L by r is equal to 1 plus e cos theta, and where L is equal to j square by km. So substituting all these values, we get, after putting the value of L by r is equal to 1 plus e cos theta, and r dot is equal to ej by sin theta by ml. Next slide, please. We'll get the relation between the eccentricity and the energy, total energy of the system, which is given by E is equal to square root of 1 plus 2 ej square by 2m square. So the condition for the values of E and capital E, for which the cone expression is specified as given below the condition. So when the total energy is greater than zero and eccentricity is greater than one, it means that the path is hyperbolic. And if the energy is zero and eccentricity is one, it is a parabola. And if the energy is less than zero and eccentricity is less than one, which it means that the path is elliptical, which we have seen, which is the point of consideration into our problem. And then a special case where E is exactly equal to minus mk square by 2g square, the eccentricity will be equal to zero, and this is the case of a circle. Next slide. So, coming to the derivation of Kepler's second law of motion. So now the area of the, okay. So if you see the figure, I have shown the, the light, in the green part, the light green, the white part, as you can see, as the area swept by the vector, or the line joining the planet and the sun in a time dt. Okay, so it is the length of the arc become, if this is d theta, the angle is subtended, then the length of the arc becomes r into d theta. So it can be approximated to be a triangle, and so the area swept can be written as half into base into height, that is half into r d theta, which is the length of the arc. So for area velocity, we'll take the time derivative of this. So it becomes dA by dt is equal to half and r square d theta by dt. Only the theta is a variable, so yeah, is equal to half rewriting, we get it half r square theta dot. But we have seen already that theta dot is j by m r square. So substituting the value of theta dot, we get dA by dt, that is the area velocity, becomes j by 2m. Here 2 is a constant, m is a constant, and we have also seen that the angular momentum j is also a constant. So we have got dA by dt is a constant, which means that the area swept is a constant for equal period of time. Next step. So yeah, the derivation of Kepler's third law. The square of the time period t, this is just the statement, as we have seen this earlier. So from the previous slide, if you remember, that is dA by dt, we got it as j by 2m. So integrating on both sides, we get dA, the total area of the ellipse that is given by pi AB, and on the other side, integrating dt, we get the time period of the revolution of man. So yeah, so and replacing b by a into square root of 1 minus e square, we get the relation between and substituting the value of E in terms of the eccentricity, in terms of the total energy of the system, we get all these, and we get T square is equal to 4 m square j square pi 2 a square 1 minus E square. So all this is constant. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we get T square is equal to 4 pi m a cube, and this is simplifying the equation to bring it to a form into our input. So we just in the last line, I mean the last second line, if you see, we get T square is equal to 4 pi m a cube by k4 is a constant, pi m k all are constants. So if we replace all those, I mean if we take all those, so we get T square is directly proportional to a cube, where t is the time period of the revolution and a is the length of the 7-meter axis. So yeah, I think it's done.